Alright, Insuco hybrid bearings, electrical current prevention, Insuco bearings, hybrid bearing testing. Insuco hybrid bearings. Demanded with a traction motor bearing with a significantly increase due to the introduction of the frequency converter with a controlled traction motor for propulsion system. The passage of electronic current through rolling bearings can cause damage in a short period of time. Insuco and hybrid bearings greatly reduce the risk of electrical current passing through the bearing. Electrical current prevention. Introduction. Reliability is an essential requirement of the modern bearing, put together with the extent of the maintenance interval. For example, it must be robust enough to have enough of the operate with electrical equipment. The modern AC technology passage of electric current through the rolling bearings can cause damage in a relatively short period of time. To enable the smooth, trouble-free operation necessary to prevent electrical current passing through the bearing with the contact areas between the housing, the outer ring, the roller elements, inner ring, shaft act as electrical contacts. Bearing damage can occur with the damage of depending on the electrical engine of the bearing. Independent of the biological behavior in the rolling contact, electrical discharge in the form of the arc and sparks can damage the rolling elements of the raceway bearing rings and produce process characterized by very high temperature similar to produced by melting and welding process creators or typical damage in later stage. A secondary effect, fluting in washboard occurs. Show the principal electrical current based on rolling contact area, rolling element, inner ring, raceway, lubrication film, electrical current passes. Alright, this shows the principal electrical current flow. On the bottom is the rail, from the top is the catenary wire, and then trailing down to one wheel set is the pantographical transformer vehicle frame, earth return wheel set, and from the that wheel set, the transformer goes into a parasitic high frequency current made up of frequency converter, traction motor, motor shield, motor bearing, gearbox, and then that wheel set. Potential risk. Starting in the 1940s, in depth of research with the phenomena with electrical current passage, published in 1960, the SKF conducted with several theoretical research activities which support with the excessive and extensive laboratory field depth of the result of these tests compared with the field experience with the operator's conclusion with the risk electrical discharge subsequent bearing damage that can occur with exceed 0.5 volts and electrical current density more than 0.1 amps millimeter squared. Related to the contact area rolling air elements of the deemed harmful with the value of the commonly stated with the current literature to DIMVDE 0123. However, the detailed risk analysis addition energy with the current flow frequency of the power have to be considered as well with the applied with especially with the frequency converted with the propulsion system because of the high frequency voltage of the current signals. Prevention solution. Electric current passage of prevention was applied with electrical machines earlier in the stage with the older design with the stationary electrical machine with the sole plumber block housing with insulated with the inserting the valve with electrical insulated sheet between the housing and the foundation. In 1950, electrical traction motors were equipped with a bearing shield incorporating electrical insulation between the part connected with the stator and part accommodating with the bearing. With at this time of the SKF produces the first of the bearing that has been electrically insulated layer pressed out on the outer ring. Later in 1970, the insulation design of the manufacturer were based on the flame sprayed coatings on the motor shield bore on the shaft bearing seat. These insulation layers typically had a breakdown voltage range from 100 volts DC. This insulation effort would be by the traction motor manufacturer were very costly, sometimes required performance reliability not suitable, sustainable enough. Alright, this show the potential electrical current flow with the traction motor is in prevention. Show the vanilla installation on the top row. Parasitic element current flow through the traction motor ground current. Show the double groove bearing with a tapered roller bearing and the electrical flow from the traction motor and through the bearings. Parasitic electrical current flow inside of the traction motor circulating element, double groove bearing, tapered roller bearings, Insuco bearings, DC and signal phase AC traction motor, the Insuco bearing with the both side of the double ball bearing and tapered bearing, the Insuco bearing, DC signal phase AC traction motor, parasitic electrical current flow inside the traction circulating element, Insuco bearing on one side. Your hybrid bearing and the three show the parasitic element current flow with the traction motor ground current. Hybrid, these three-phase traction motor with the frequency converted with the hybrid bearings on both sides. Also, you'll find the parasitic element electrical current flow in the traction motor circulating current with a three-phase traction motor frequency converted hybrid bearing on one side. Your design variation electrically insulated bearing arrangements show from the left. These shows the insulation at the top, the housing with the circumferential integrated insulation. White is your bearing insulation. Gray, gray is attachment part insulation. Blue is ceramic material. You have your housing with tapered bearing with the housing with a circumferential integrated insulation housing seat. Outside surface racing, and then you'd have the ceramic roller element and hybrid bearing, outside surface inner ring, Insuco bearing, shaft seats and abutment standard bearing. In 1970, they already started with a serial production for the first electrically insulated bearing with the Insuco bearing. With some of the years later, with the test with the initiated with the ceramic ball with the and rollers at the electric insulator they called hybrid bearings of applied with a traction motor in the late 1990s. The ceramic roller bearing became available for the serial production of reliable quality. In around 2000, the first traction motor bearing units were equipped with the ceramic roller bearing elements. Alright, at the bottom it shows on the left the Insuco bearing basic design, and on the right it shows the hybrid bearing basic design. Then it shows the Insuco traction motor bearing unit design on the left, and then on the right shows the hybrid traction motor bearing basic design. Show that the one has a ball bearing groove, the other has a double ball bearing groove, and Alright, on the left you see we cover bearing damage covered electrical erosion, show the bolt going through a bearing, electrical bearing breakdown of the lubricating film, and then the next one would be a storage localized heating lead with the melting of the metal of materials raw element ring on the contact area, and then below that one you see the rolling element leave the contact area, molten metal particles and small craters will be left behind. And then below that, you see protruding material flattened with rolling over the worn away detached particle but distributed within the bearing. Yellow is lubrication, dark red is remolten material, light shade red is rehardened material, and the brick, the pinkish color is annealed tapered material. Alright, then on the right, you see excessive voltage on the bearing, ball bearing race with large spalls. Electrical process. Excessive voltage of electrical current path through the bearing without going with the one ring via the other V with the rolling element. The damage can occur with the contact surface of the process similar to electrical arc welding, where this is high current density with a small contact surface. Materials heated temperature ranging from the tempering with the melting levers of the cover, the appearing of the discolor of the bearing side, but the material will have been tempered and rehardened, melted with the craters informed with the material and has been melted. Appearance in single craters, raceway, and rolling elements, localized burns in raceway and on rolling elements. Alright, current leakage. The current flow continuously with the arc with the bearing surface, the even low intensity with the raceway surface, the effect with the heat eroded many of the tiles from the micro craters are formed mostly with the rolling contact surface of each crater for the closely positioned one another. They are small diameter compared with the damage with excessive voltage. Flutes of the washboarding will develop with the craters over time with the secondary effect and are found with the raceway and roll of rings and rollers. The extent of the damage depends on the number of the factors, type of the bearing, bearing size of the electrical regime, bearing, load, speed, and lubricant. In addition with the bearing steel, for the surface of the damage, with the grease color of the damage, for the bearing might be carbonized, eventually resulting in poor lubrication conditions, and consequently to the surface of the distress, spalling of the very similar with electrical erosion damages appearing with the axle box applications and sometimes gearbox application DINVDE 0123 describe the current flow of the railway vehicles in detail. Alright, to the top left you see the dull gray surface of the rolling elements can be, top right, the dull gray surface of the rolling elements can be signed with a micro cratering left ball with dull gray surface, right ball, new ball with a mirrored picture with the ball to the left. Then it shows below that, it shows the fluting in the washboard and raceway cover, the passage of the damage of the electrical current, outer ring raceway, the deep groove ball bearing. Alright, there was one more picture. Fluting and washboard and raceway cover the passage damaging electrical current. Notice the Or a single creator damage typically with a DC application due to the increase of the use of the frequency converter for the variable speed. The drive of the application creatoring is the most common type of electrical damage seen with the roller bearing, with electrical current continuously passing through the bearing and the operation of the raceway strip may become effective with the many thoughts of the creator is formed at the strip of the wood strip of the cup of the dull dark gray appliance. To the right of that you see lubrication degradation, basic black discolored grease on the cage bars covered with the passage of the current. Lubrication degradation or show the 200 200 the different microscopic electronic craters. Lubrication degradation, local high temperature cover the additive lubrication showing the burn base oil of the cover the additives to be consumed with the more closely. In this case, grease application, grease lubrication, grease shown with the black and hardened rapid breakdown, drastic shortened grease and the bearing surface life. Rehardening the bearing steel. In addition with the crater material with the rehardening and the more brittle than the original bearing steel due to the current continual current flow of the bearing strip of the layer will be rehardened again and again with the finally rehardened scope of the end cover. And the original bearing steel with its edge with the rehardened layer that can be observed with the colored air with the cross section. Be careful that the bearing is rehardened due to the high temperature which it can cover the number of the region not only with the passage of the electrical current. Alright, this shows what's edged and rehardened layer that can be observed with the white colored original bearing material. Traction motor bearing insulation requirements. The first one we'll read is frequency converter AC motors. Usage. Most commonly used DC motors. Requirements for some operators. Resistant requirements. Frequently converted AC traction motor impedance. And then DC traction motor resistant solution. Frequency converter AC traction motor hybrid insulat bearings depending on the special application requirements and DC motor insulat bearings. Electrical features. In recent decades, the demand for the AC motor railway have especially the industrial applications that have grown rapidly with the three-phase induction motor, most commonly used with the traction motor in the railway industry. Classic DC traction motors are demanded in some of the railway operatives that require for the continuing decrease. Frequency converter for the power switching for the semiconductor device, for the frequency converter for the chain with the, from the thyristor to the gate turn-off transistors, or GTOs. From further insulated with the gate bipolar transistors and insulated gate bipolar transistors are used to create with a pulse with a modulate with the output voltage waveform, thereby improve the efficiency, dynamic performance of the drive. However, there is no advantage for the compromise. Some of the part of the classic voltage with current generated with the motor itself is not an effect that have been observed with the motor with the supply, but with the pulse width modulated converter with a frequency of 3 to 12 kilohertz, depending on the power range. It now has been discovered the bearing with the damage caused by the high frequency with the 5 kilohertz, 10 megahertz. Current flow through the increase of these fast switching 100 ends a second. The insulated gated bipolar transistor semiconductors. The insulated gated bipolar transistors also got very rapid voltage rise, up to 2.5 to 8 kilovolts, even up to 10 kilovolts US at the converter output. Voltage pulse of the gate turn-off transistor thyroids compared with the insulated gate bipolar transistors. Show the spikes. Alright, your magnetic flux over the symmetry with the motor with the three phase and some of the node zero with the lead back the common made voltage. The basic cause for the bearing current with the magnetic flux is symmetry with the motor with the symmetry analogy over the cable of the fast switching frequency converter with the common mode voltage. Two sources of the potential risk for the electrical motors are which they are main fed, converter fed motors. Last source of the only exist for the converter of the fed motors. The potential problem with them right, but they cover the different parasitic currents. High frequency shaft grounding current for the high frequency circuit element currents for the capacity discharge of the roller bearing current and operation current electrically with the oil fill separates rolling elements for the ratio of the electrical point with the view film acts the dielectrical, which is charged with the order voltage for high frequency. It forms the capacity over the capacity dependent on the various parameters such as the lubricant temperature of the capacity plus the film thickness of the voltage reached with a certain limit. The call with the breakdown of the threshold voltage of the lubricant capacitor will discharge the high frequency capacity of the discharge of current occur, but in this case the current is led with the internal strength capacity with the motor with the overcome every time with the converter switch. Obviously, the induction motor fed by the frequency converter is very complex. The drive with the system in which influenced by the many of the parameters whole drive, including the supply with the DC link switch element of the cable of the motor lead, has been regarded as the total system consists of the reductance and distributed capacity. The basic three traction motor propulsion concepts: potential cause of electrical erosion. Magnetic flux asymmetry with the motor with a direct propulsion system is yes, and electrical single-phase propulsion system is yes. AC frequency converter propulsion system yes. Your asymmetry non-shielding cable direct current propulsion system no. Alternating current single-phase propulsion system no. AC frequency converter propulsion system yes. Your common mode voltage direct current propulsion system no. Alternating current single-phase propulsion system no. AC frequency converter propulsion system yes. Alright, bearing raceways and very large modification. Bearing raceways have no electrical current passages. Bearing raceways are damaged with electrical current passage. Show to the left. And then DC propulsion, AC frequency converter propulsion system. Traction motor principle with the inherent straight capacity. Show the frequency converter. Protective to the earth line 1, earth line 2. Motor cables, the bearing, ball bearing, non-driver end bearings and driver end bearings. The motor frame, stator, winding, rotor, and gearbox. And then show the stator, the capacitor, the resistors, an induction coil, ground, and two other capacitors. Schematical electrical circuit module in mounted intercoat bearings housings on the right with a resistor, ceramic coat with a capacitor, resistor outer ring, lubrication rolling element with a resistor, and capacitor, and below that inner ring resistor, shaft resistor. Influence electrical parameters for the distinction between the DC AC electrical regime, but how the behavior of the intercoat bearing with the application for the DC application. Intercoat bearings act with the normal osmic resistance of the aluminum oxide with the insulator, therefore the ohmic resistance R with the layer with the important quantity with the breakdown with the voltage with standard layer with the shade 1000 volt DC with the resistance bigger than 550 mega provide with the efficiency insulation of the bearing AC applicated for the especially high frequency over the P pulse wave modulation converted with no longer available. The equivalent electrical circuit diagram whole bearings considered elements of the intercoat bearings such as the inner and outer roller elements with the cage lubricating contact surface between the roller elements race base. Similar coating has developed the other possible approximation over the bearing and equivalent electrical source that's shown in the illustration above. The difficulty to create precise equivalent circuit bearing electrical system. Two main reasons of this is the massive metal elements with high frequency electrical field that have very complicated three-dimensional structure. The possibility present for the eddy currents with the structure has to be considered with the contacts between the outer ring roller elements between the rolling elements and the inner ring created with the capacity failure of these capacitancies chain with the stophus gasoline according to the dynamic bearings over there, for example, the do vibrations. Alright, you're modeling electrical insulating behavior, electrical insulating layer, such as the aluminum oxide, aluminum 2, oxide 3, upcoating with the model of the parallel connection with the resistor capacitor. Therefore, the impedance Z must be conserved with which is described. Impedance is equal to the resistance over 1 imaginary unit times the W or 2N 2 pi frequency times the resistance times the capacity. And the valve impedance can be obtained from Z is equal to 1 over the square root of 1 over the resistance squared plus 2 times the pi times the frequency of the capacity squared. The equation illustrates with the increase of the frequency, the incorporating of the capacity, be careful with the stronger, coupled with the decrease of the impedance with the decrease. The impedance of the bearing of the capacity for the coating shall be kept as small with the possible capacity in scope bearing dependent for the side of the coated surface of each for the bearing thickness for the insulating coating for the coating of the material insulated indicated with the following equation. Capacity is equal to the dielectrical constant in a vacuum times the voltage resistant voltage per minute, the cost of the insulating coating over times A coated contact surface area over the thickness of the ceramic coating. Or this shows the measured impedance for the capacity intercoat with the deep groove ball bearing outer ring coating impedance, frequency in hertz for capacity and number of the frequencies, number of farads over the frequency in hertz. Selection of the electrical insulation of the rebasing design solution, electrical insulation, traction motor bearing, depending on the application of these requirements. Hybrid bearing design, Insucoat bearing design code with the inner ring, which is mainly used for the traction motor bearing units, industrial electrical machines. Insucoat bearing designs with code with the outer ring with the U for the traction motor generator railways. Alright, dark blue is your hybrid bearing design, light gray is Insucoat inner ring coated, white is the outer ring coated. They show the functional frequency of the capacity and impedance and ohmic resistance bearing design of the different ohmic resistance frequency capacity. Electrical impedance of vector function based on the ohmic resistance frequency capacity. The capacity measures the amount of electrical charge stored with a given electrical potential. And it shows some more bearings. Alright, Insucoat bearings. Insucoat bearings are designed to prevent the current through the plastic of the bearing with the bearing very complicated effect with the solution compared with the insulation method. They integrate the insulation property of the bearing. Insucoat bearing can improve the reliability and improve the machine up to the time virtually eliminating the problem of electrical corrosion. Standard assortment Insucoat bearing with the listed with the handbook continue with the most commonly used type of the variations of single row deep groove ball bearings and single row cylindrical roller bearing with the railway application traction motor bearings. Or TMBU can be designed with the Insucoat coating for suspension tube. The Insucoat tapered roller bearings with the coated outer rings can be supplied. To the right shows the Insucoat with an tapered roller bearing for suspension tubes. Test code with the SKF insulated bearing solution relative to the other insulation approaches. The total cost, light gray is the housing insulation, including bearing, dark gray is shaft insulating bearing, including bearing, and then blue is the SKO insulating insulation solution. Alright, your plasma spray process principle. The blue is your water, the green is your gas, the red, light red is your insulation, the cathode is shown purple, the dark purple, the plasma nozzle, light purple, shows the voltmeter in red, the AM with a battery check on it, and positive and negative, powder, dotted white, and coating, white on the strip on the bearing material, blue is the rough surface, and show the coating rough surface in the bearing material. Design featured Insucoat bearing standard for the bearing with it has the outside for the inner ring with the outer ring with the plasma spray with the aluminum oxide for coating with the coating sealed with the resin, protected against conductive effect with the water, insulate and moisture with the railway application. The Insucoat bearings typically outside the diameter side with the outer ring coated with the aluminum oxide. These bearings will be identified with the designation suffix VL 0241, the basic coating with the same with the voltage of up to 1,000 volts DC. However, the coating of the variation stand with a higher voltage can be supplied on request. Cage, if the Insucoat bearing with one or more of the following cage, the deep groove ball bearings, electrical traction motor generator mainly fitted with a riveted machine brass cage. Cylindrical roller bearings, electrical traction motor generators can be fitted with the same cage as the comparable standard cylindrical roller bearings, implementation designs, and associated components. For insulation, reasonably recommended for the bearing with a coated ring with the designation suffix VL0241 housing shoulder space sleeve, then should not have the diameter smaller than the abutment of the dimensions of AUV listed on the SKF catalog. Mounting and maintenance during the mounting. Insucoat bearings should be handled within some way with the same way with the standard bearings. Proper lubrication is important to fulfill utilize the surface of the Insucoat bearings. Insucoat design bearings the way it virtually eliminates premature bearing failure with galvanized straight electrical current, economical solution compared with the other insulation options, higher reliability, lower cycle cost. And to the right of that, you'll see an abutment dimension outer ring coat with the Insucoat bearings. Alright, other design features additional information, minimum load, axle load, carrying capacity, equivalent dynamic bearing load, equivalent static bearing load, temperature limit, and speed limit to refer to either chapter of the traction motor bearing units or SKF catalog. Shows Insucoat bearing data, the deep groove ball bearing, cylindrical roller and bearing dimension, standard boundary dimension, ISO 15 tolerance, normal high accuracy required for the values ISO 492. The additional information referred to the SKF catalog. Aluminum oxide layer with external surface with either outer or inner ring does not influence the accuracy. Internal, check with the suitable clearance with glass. Value of the dismount with the under zero measuring the ISO 57531. SKF catalogs allowable misalignment identical with the comparable standard bearings. Alright, electrical property of the Insulated layer provides protection against the AC/DC current minimum ohmic resistance 50 mega ohms and 100 volt DC. The test the SKA shown by the electrical breakdown of the insulating layer curve at 3000 volts DC. Insulated specification SKF specification designation suffix no electrical operating voltage UC electrical resistance minimum mega ohms. All right, your preferred range. The preferred range based on the survey over the September 12th, 2012. The range is living collection with the updated published feature in the the same range. Insulated bearings. Additional information with these bearings can be found in SKF catalogs online. Whether further application or leave data obtained with completing listing designation prefix suffix can be obtained. For the traction motor Insulated cylindrical roller bearing, the NU type, the diameter and the dimension bearing width, NU, NJN, and NUP, and they show the serial numbers and their dimensions. Traction motor Insulated deep ball bearing grooves, the whole diameter of the bearing, the inner diameter, and the bearing width. And a picture of bearings. Alright, hybrid bearings. Hybrid bearings provide with a further improvement of the electrical insulation properties, especially with the modern high-frequency converter system and applicated with the bearings equipped with the roller elements made with the bearing grade with the silicone nitride with a hybrid bearing with a superior electrical insulation property with very high frequency extend with the maintenance intervals. Alright, these rolling bearings are equipped with the rolling elements made with the bearing grade with the silicone nitride with hybrid bearing with a solution electrical insulation prop with a very high frequency. Explaining the maintenance of the intervals can be based on an application with the new optimized grade for life with the guidelines. The assortment of the SKF hybrid bearings listed within the handbook for the compromised popular side with electrical railway motor generators include single roll deep groove barrel bearings, single roll row cylindrical roll bearings. In addition, with the traction motor bearing units. Can be designed with a hybrid designing feature. The hybrid has the ring made with the bearing steel rolling elements made with the bearing with the grade silicone nitrate or silicone 3 nitrate 4. Because of the solution silicone nitrate such that the excellent electrical insulator hybrids can be with the extensive insulating housing from the use of the shaft of the AC/DC motor as well as in the generators. In addition, with the bearing excellent with the insulator with the hybrid bearings, we have a higher speed with the capability to provide longer bearing with the surface life with the same operating condition with the same size. All steel bearing hybrid bearings also perform extremely well under the vibrating and oscillation condition, often not necessary with a preload with a bearing applicable. Apply special grease under these conditions. The bearing performance is not only determined by the load speed rating, but the number of the factors contributing to bearing maintenance to the performance, mainly with the fact of the SKF hybrid bearing with the performance compared with the same side with the all steel bearings include your insulating property non-conduct with the material silicone nitrate protect with the rings electrical current damage, therefore increase the bearing surface life of the application, otherwise damaging electrical current shorten bearing surface life of the AC and DC motor generated. Lower density of the bearing grade with the silicone nitrate rolling out at 60% lower than the same size rolling element made with the bearing steel. Low weight means lower in air with the translate with superior performance during the rapid start with the stop with the higher speed capabilities. Low friction, low density with the silicone nitrate rolling element combined with the low friction significantly reduce the bearing temperature, highly speed with the cooling running to increase the surface life of the both bearing and lubrication. The high hardness, the high modulus elasticity, high degree with the hardness silicone nitrate rolling element, meaning with the high wear of the resistance, increase the bearing stiffness with longer bearing surface life within contaminated environments. This shows your applied SKF optimized grease life within guideline. Further information, dark blue TF relubrication interval 70 degrees and T optimized equals T grease bearing performance factor. Light blue show the T grease relative to the value of standard bearings, hybrid TMBUs and hybrid TMBUs optimized cage. Alright, resistance false brittle. The stationary bearing with the subject with the vibration of these risks with the false brittle will occur with the brittle is in formation shallow depression of the ratio eventually leave with the small premature bearing failure and incapable where the steel rolling bearings were played with the ceramic rolling bearing elements bearings were found to be significantly less susceptible to false brittling. Reduce the risk of smearing between the silicone and nitride steel. Even under the inadequate lubrication did the reduce of the smearing between the silicone and nitride steel surfaces, they enable the hybrid to operate with a much longer application of where they are. High-speed, fast accelerations applicate where the insufficient hydrodynamic oil film support with undistributed bearing operation. K is greater than 1. K is less than 1. For hybrid bearings, commonly applied with a K is equal to 1. Bearing life calculation, all conditions carries less than 1. Running faster or longer than the combined lower density silicone nitride, lower coefficient friction with a highly hardened for the fact that the silicone nitride does not smear. The raceways under poor low lubrication conditions. The result of the bearing will run faster longer even under the most difficult operation conditions. The low cost, efficient thermal expansion silicone nitride rolling element, lower efficiency thermal expansion than the same type of the rolling element made with the bearing steel, but the main less of the sensitivity temperature gradients within the bearing and the more accurate per reloaded clearance of the control. Speed capability with a typical hybrid bearing with a higher speed capability, same size with all steel bearings. However, some case for the execution may limit the permissible speed. Hybrid bearing design super electrical insulation properties even with a very high frequency extended maintenance with the intervals. Due to the longer grease life of the bearing of all the steel bearings, the energy saving capabilities because of the low friction, higher precaution, precision extended maintenance with intervals because of the lower operating temperature. Are your benchmark silicone nitrate porcelain material properties? Material bearing steel grade bearing silicone nitrate and porcelain. Comprehensive strength 2300, 3000, and 950. Tensile strength 1918, 800, 150. Density 7.79. 3.2 and 2.9, hardness 700, 1600, 800, elastic modules 210, 310, 125, thermal expansion 11.7, 3.5, electrical resistive 0.410 to the 6th, conductor 10 to the 12th, insulator and 10 to the 12th insulator, dielectrical strength, just for the bearing silicone nitrate 15, relative to the dielectrical constant bearing grade silicone nitrate 8. Hybrid deep groove ball bearings. Deep groove ball bearings are the most widely used bearings, especially with electrical motors. The non-separable bearings with suitable high speed with a deeply interrupted the raceway grooves have the close oscillation of the balls, enabling bearings to accommodate radial load with the axle load with the both direction for additional information. SKF catalogs. Hybrid cylindrical roller bearings. Hybrid cylindrical roller bearings are commonly used with electrical motors, especially with the traction motor application running with a severe operation condition. They can accommodate heavy load radial loads and high speed with additional information for the refer to chapter bearing design chapter 3. Other design features for the additional information: minimum load, axle load, carrying capacity, equivalent dynamic bearing load, equivalent static bearing load, temperature limit, and speed limits for the refer to either the traction motor bearing units, chapter 5 SKF catalog. Hybrid bearing data, deep ball, grand groove, and cylindrical roller bearings, dimension standards. Tolerance, internal clearance, alignment, allowable misalignment, electrical properties. Are your preferred range? The preferred range based on an assortment of September 2012 of the range living collection will be updated, published in the future. The standard range for the hybrid bearings shown with additional information about the bearings can be found with the SKF catalogs online with the SKF bearings. With a further application relevant data that can be obtained with a complete listing with the designation prefix of it that can be found on page 94 through 96. Should the traction bearing hybrid bearings be deep ball groove bearing with cylindrical roller bearing NJ design. Their diameter, inside diameter, and bearing width. Your hybrid bearing testing to make sure that the ceramic material to perform optimal bearing applicate for the careful assessment of the material used with the rolling elements and after the test procedure have been established over the time for this purpose. In general, the first material assessment can be done with a check with the macro and microstructure, the homogeneous section sample, the blank finish ball with the material sample, the mounting, and the publishing all hardness with indentation fracture resistant if possible with the bearing material contained in it that could be determined by relatively quickly. New method of assessing strength of the finish with the ceramic balls have developed especially high strength material that has been seen with the surface quality has and efficient strength with an and the surface quality with the bearing with a better than the reference samples with the bending ball with the notch ball has the test advantage with the strength with the evaluated rear ball bearing balls. Not bending bar for the specified with the present with the ISO 26602 with the balls attached notch are loaded vertically. They act in similar way to bending bars. Check with the macro and microstructure homogeneous section sample of the optical test over the ball surface of the principle of the notch ball testing the band and strength with evaluation ceramic. A is the stress and WN is the width. Your endurance life testing rig with a 274 axially loaded hybrid angular contact bearings. Notch balls tested, ceramic balls. Traction 5 traction motor bearing units.